Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Roten, senior reporter for Hotel News Now, and I'm here today with Jonathan Lehrfeld, a CoStar news reporter based in the Washington, D.C. area, and Joseph Bojanowski, president of PM Hotel Group. For this episode, we're going to talk about what's going on with the D.C. hotel market and how that's fitting into everything that's going on there. So, thanks to both of you for joining me today, and I hope you're excited to talk about all things D.C.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be with you today, Brian.
Thanks for having us.
So, let's talk about the market. There's, unsurprisingly, been a lot of activity going on there. Most of it, related to the federal government. We saw, demand boosts from, swearing-ins of new members of Congress, as well as President Trump's inauguration. There's also, we're seeing a lot of headlines about, layoffs of federal employees and other changes going on in government agencies. So there's just, like I said, a lot of activity, and that's, we want to see how that translates to what's going on with hotels in the broader market. So to get started, since both of you, live and work around the DC area, what are some observations you can give me about what's going on there? What are you seeing when you're walking around? What are you hearing? Riding on the metro, or when you're going to one of the airports there. What's the vibe?
Well, interestingly, having been stuck in rush hour traffic while I was driving yesterday morning, it was next to a metro line that had multiple cars going past, and I was looking at them. It was literally standing room only. And then I read today that Monday and Tuesday of this week had the highest ridership on Metro since 2019.
Wow.
So people are back, primarily federal workers, into the office, and rush hour is definitely back to the 2019 levels, and a little painful. Um, Other than that, general conversation is just around, I think a specific word is volatile, right? There's just a massive amount of volatility here, whether it's uh, policies and executive orders and responding to emails about the 5 things you've done, or whether you actually have a job or not.
Yes, I would definitely second the notion that metro and traffic in DC has increased. As a metro rider myself, I
Oh
will tell you
yeah,
that
yeah.
it has, at least in my experience being in the city in the past, 7, 8 years, not nearly this crowded. And um, you know, the Castle card ticketing or security has also gone up from the pandemic. So people are definitely back into the office. And the broader context, as has been described, is that federal workers are starting to head back to the office more full time in person in DC. A lot of that has to do with some executive orders and other memos that have been issued by the new administration. A little bit of color is that the district's Department of Transportation here in the city issued a warning that folks should expect traffic delays, and specifically in the corner of the city Navy Yard, when a lot of military personnel started coming back into the city, there were warnings that they might not have enough parking in their lots.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Which
there's
is funny
there,
because they did not that first day, right? So there were like something that literally, like, I think it was 4 or 7,000 people came back, and there were not enough parking spaces for everyone.
exactly. I mean, so people are coming back into the office, and DC, being a huge tourism city, is seeing a lot of folks, really continue to make their way into the national capital area, and the leadership of the city has been working for a while to try and revitalize the downtown and attract more foot traffic. So I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about with that.
Does it feel kind of like how it did, pre-pandemic, in terms of just whether it's foot traffic, whether it's car traffic, whether it's how crowded it is on the train?
Uh, for me, yeah, specifically this week, it felt like it was building up a little bit, but this week feels like it's been full on with on both metro and foot traffic and vehicular traffic as well.
Yeah, I would say yes. It's increased, and from my conversations with sources in the area, businesses are reacting to that. There have been restaurants downtown that had limited hours and lunch service during the pandemic that are starting to re-expand those. So I would say yes, coming back to pre-pandemic levels, especially now.
So let's touch on something I mentioned briefly in the intro here. Joseph, looking back to the inauguration, and let's talk about the impact that has had on the local hotel market. You've got a handful of hotels in DC. So how did this year's inauguration feel compared to previous inaugurations and other Januaries when, not the hottest, not just temperature, but, month of the year. Uh,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We've got like in the larger DMV about 16 hotels with about 2,700 rooms, and they're anywhere from like a 83 room micro hotel up to 350, 400 room full service hotels. And what we saw was in the CBD and CBD adjacent submarket, it was great for around the inauguration, right? And even when you threw in that negative impact to demand around the weather and the decision to move the parade and all the outdoor events
Mhm.
indoors, um, didn't impact the CBD, and the adjacent CBD adjacent areas. But what it did affect was the suburban and outer markets that typically have a positive impact from think like bands, support personnel, more cost conscious attendees where they typically stay. And so great for DC as a whole, particularly the CBD. 74% RevPAR growth year over year for the CBD, mostly through ADR, and 10 to 20% RevPAR range growth for the suburban market. So all in all, pretty good.
I just wanted to jump in to add
Yeah,
a little bit
please.
of clarity to listeners as well. The CBD is the Central Business District of
Oh,
Washington. So I'm sure most people, or hopefully some people, know that, but it encompasses a lot of the downtown area. And as someone who was in the city during inauguration, I will attest that it was freezing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there were a lot of people downtown, and there was a lot of fencing and stuff going up around the city, a lot for security reasons. But I had heard from landlords, specifically in the office market, that had shifted access to buildings and properties
Mm.
because the uh, the fencing was up not just on the inauguration weekend, but a little bit ahead of that, a little bit after that. Um, but I know that from the Hotel News Now teams reporting that there had been a lot of demand in the area from around the inauguration weekend, even though it looks like stays may have been at a shorter length. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and the other thing that was interesting about this one, which caused some concerns going in, is we know what from a hotel perspective, demand perspective, and for the city, we know what a change in administration looks like,
Mhm.
right? We know what a reelection looks like in terms of the events and the demand that comes from that. But in our lifetime, we have not had a change in administration that was with a previous president. So there were a lot
Mhm.
of questions around, what kind of demand that would drive to, and what kind of activity for the and participation from the city. But all in all, it was pretty good.
It's a very good point. We like to look back and see what the you know past statistics will tell us, but I don't think our stats go quite back that far
Yeah, yeah,
since the last time
exactly.
that
Yeah,
happened.
yeah,
Uh, but the DC market, we're hearing obviously a lot of good things about it now, but the market was one that was among those that were slower to recover from the pandemic. A lot of urban hotel markets were slower to recover, but we've really seen it make a comeback. So, you know. Can you tell us just observationally what you have seen in terms of that build back of demand?
sure. I 2020 in 2023, Washington, D.C. was the highest RevPAR growth market in the top 25 markets in the US, right? It was like an 18.8% RevPAR growth. Um, you know, lots of growth because it was down the year before and really down the year before that. But the growth is coming off a couple of really good years. And in 2024, also was a great year too, with a solid RevPAR growth of 5%, the third consecutive year that DC was in the top 10 growth markets and top 10 ranking in the top 10 of the top 25 hotel markets in the US. So pretty good stuff happening there. And in 2023, for the year, DC did surpass 2019 on RevPAR on a nominal basis. So, and continue RevPAR, I mean, ADR growth last year, so significantly ahead of 19 and ADR growth. And generally, over the last 3 years, pretty positive, although, anemic, obviously, in 2021, 22.
Yeah, looking at our analytics from CoStar, it looks like that growth is expected at roughly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, roughly 3% for 2025. And I mean, there's been a lot of really interesting transactions over the past few weeks, few months. Just to highlight a few, there is an acquisition of the former Hotel Harrington in downtown DC. That's considered one of the oldest hotels in the city, if I remember correctly. I had done a story previously about the Keybridge Marriott just outside of DC that is set for demolition in the coming weeks or months. There's also a new hotel that's going to be opening in Frederick, Maryland, that I had done a story on previously. They're converting a 19th century convent and Catholic school in the area. So there's just a lot going on, kind of broadly within the DMV region. I think one of the stories that I want to continue to follow is whatever happens to the Waldorf Astoria property, the old post office building
Yeah.
here in downtown DC, which was also once the Trump Hotel. And there have reportedly been some talks about family members from the Trump family or the Trump organization trying to reacquire the lease there. So that's something we're keeping our eye on.
Absolutely. And let's get into this one. We've heard a lot about disruptions at federal agencies, layoffs and changes to size, scope, you know make having people come back to work in the office. So Jonathan, considering this is your coverage area, you've had a bunch of stories looking at the impact or potential impact of some of these decisions from the Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency, on the local real estate market. Can you kind of give us an overview about what you're hearing from your sources and what's actually happening there?
Yeah, to say it's confusing is maybe an understatement. There is there's a lot going on. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. But I will say that most recently, some of the stories that my team and I have been working on are in regard to the leases that have been terminated by the Doge team, the Department of Government Efficiency. As of earlier this week, there have been approximately 440 or so leases that have been terminated. That's what the Doge team has said online, and those numbers continue to get updated regularly. Some of those leases were already up for expiration, some of them were in holdover. So we're sorting through all that data. But broadly speaking, federal workers in the city and in the DMV area as a whole have a lot of uncertainty ahead, and that could theoretically impact who is in the city in the near future and the long future, and therefore, how many people are attracted to come, to visit them or to visit the city as a whole, and that could have ripple effects in the hospitality market. You know, Recently, federal workers have been asked, among other things, to, send in what they have been doing, their accomplishments for the week. They have had their jobs terminated. They have had things restructured. Um, and there are a lot of lawsuits and moving pieces that are kind of changing every day. So I don't want to get too in the nitty gritty, but I will say from friends in the DC area who I have that work in the federal um, government, folks I've spoken to, there's just a lot of uncertainty going on.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think that's right. And that uncertainty just brings caution, right? And it's the unknown impact of these unprecedented activities in the federal government since the change of administration. And we've got lots of data, we've got lots of experience with sort of the standard, federal government disruptions, whether it be a change of administration or government shutdowns or budget showdowns and new policies and all that kind of stuff. So historically, we've been able to make informed decisions based on that historical data and forecast and run our business. But in this current environment, the unknowns are greater than the knowns, and it puts us in a more reactive mode, which is a super uncomfortable way to operate a business and to try and forecast and all the other things we do in the lodging industry. And if you're in an environment where you gotta sell for some reason or transact, it's just too soon to tell what the results of that combination, as Jonathan mentioned, of federal employees being back in the office, but then the workforce reduction initiatives that are happening at the same time, and office space reduction. So for us, we're monitoring it very closely. Our hotels have seen some significant cancellations, particularly on the group side, ranging anywhere from like $30,000 to $500,000 for individual hotels. And like that's direct government agencies as well as nonprofits and government contractors. And then, really interestingly, this week we had a cancellation in one of our hotels that occurred when an artist who was to be performing at the Kennedy Center
Oh,
and the
right.
entire support crew for that artist, they canceled all the rooms. So now there's like a ripple effect that's beginning. So again, lots of unknowns, more than knowns, lots of caution, and sort of in general, I think it's almost like a press pause and see what happens over the next 2 or 3 months. And throwing another wrench kind of in that or variable is on March 14th, which is just a couple of weeks away, we have the expiration of the continuing resolution. So we could have
Right.
it shut down, like could have anything, like who knows what's going to be happening. So, volatile, cautious, press pause, and I kind of wait and see because none of this has ever happened before.
Yeah, in some ways that seems like a normal week in Washington. The government's going to shut
Yeah.
down. We've
Yeah,
got,
yeah, yeah, right.
uh,
Yeah.
but also, it has not happened in my experience like this before. And from a lot of folks who I've spoken with that have been here far longer than me, it has not happened like this before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's going to
yeah,
be
if there's
interesting.
anything I remember from the beginning of the pandemic, the hotel industry just loves uncertainty. You love not being able to see 5 feet in front of your face.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So hiring even so the other thing that's gotten really interesting, which throwing another variable into that, which has come up in the last couple of weeks when with these government groups that are like in the midst of a booking process right now with our
Hmm.
hotels, they're requesting to have language added to the force majeure component of the cancellation clause in the group contracts to add language allowing for no fee cancellations if there's a disruption or cancellation of the currently approved funding.
That's interesting.
So now that comes on top of it. So, oh, we'll hold like a lot of rooms for you. And if for some reason your funding gets canceled the day before, we're out.
I mean,
So more uncertainty on top of all of that.
yeah, what do you yeah, what are you supposed to do in either for either party? I mean, on one hand, like, well, you signed this deal, but on the other hand, there's no money.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
oh
Yeah,
boy.
yeah,
I think one positive thing that is happening though in the DC market, and in DC proper specifically, is that there has been a lot of movement recently, and I've done a handful of stories on this, on office to other commercial property conversions, and a lot of that has to do with a new tax abatement program that has been announced in the city, um, and um, and so there's an opportunity for more hotel growth there if some of these now vacant properties can be um, transformed from their underutilized self into these new hospitality spaces.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, and Jonathan, you probably have better insights into this than I do, or data, but anecdotally, what I've heard is that there has been a significant increase in inquiries on multifamily slash apartments for people who moved away and were working remotely, who now had to make a decision as to whether they're going to quit or they're coming back to DC. And both, particularly out like in the Arlington area, right in the immediate like surrounding DC, and then in DC, I've heard that the activity and inquiries around multifamily have increased significantly in the last couple of weeks, associated with people who are going to move back into the city to work in the office.
Yeah, I believe that. I don't know if I have more specific insight than you, but I will say that, as from our CoStar analytics, as opposed to office market construction, multifamily construction has been, on the rise, or was on the rise a lot during the pandemic. And that's not just within one pocket of the city. That's happening, um, you know, across, across neighborhoods in Navy Yard, and yeah, elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think generally is good for the city, right? It's that activity and that activation is positive.
So I guess my next question then for both of you then is, as you look to the rest of 2025, as the time of our recording, we're just at the end of February here, so we still got the good 10 months left. But what how does the rest of the year seem to be shaping up for your respective areas? What are I mean, Jonathan, you touched on it a bit here. Just what investors are looking at in DC real estate. What are the opportunities with all of these things going on? And then, Joseph, what are your expectations for travel demand, knowing that even with all of these changes and disruptions going on, there's always something to draw people into DC.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to keep our eye on, but it's from what I've heard from folks, and as Joseph has sort of mentioned, there's a bit of a wait and see approach happening within the market, and so whether it's these tax abatements that attract people, whether it's new tourism things that are happening in the city. The pandas are back in town. If you didn't hear, which you should definitely check out. There's just a lot going on that I know we'll continue to keep our eye on. And beyond this year into next year, we have the 250th anniversary of independence that will attract, I imagine, a bajillion visitors to the city. So um, I think the demand from what I've seen will only increase in the coming months.
So obviously inauguration and a lot of other reasons. The From a hotel demand perspective, January was great. First couple of weeks of February were good. Last week, on the awesome information provided to us weekly by CoStar and STR, um, every single day of the week, occupancy was down year over year. Right. So then you've got this year to date um, RevPAR growth that is declining in the month to date for February, and then went very negative in the last week of reporting. So What does that mean? I don't know. There could be outliers in last week, and maybe there was a larger convention here last year that caused that, but it's something to keep our eye on, and if that's happening, you know, e- to Jonathan's point, there's a tremendous amount of diversity of demand here, right? So you think universities and tourism and arts and all the other things that bring people into Washington D.C. The other thing we know about D.C. is that once the budgets are finalized and people will be here to to get a piece of that, whatever piece they're looking at. So, and then you think with people in their office, now people will really be coming here to have those kind of face-to-face meetings. So think lobbyists, foundations, like everybody that needs to be here to kind of ensure that their piece of that pie is protected. And optimistically, the sort of technically, when Congress approves funding, it's approved. It isn't allowed. No other branch of the government is allowed to simply stop that. So optimistically, you could look at this and say, once all this stuff gets settled around some of the Doge stuff and some of the more controversial things and the continuing resolution over the next couple of weeks, that budget is there and those are approved funds, and they could very easily and realistically be spent in the latter part of Q2 and into Q3, right through the end of the fiscal year in September. So we could have a pretty significant return of government and other travel in that time period, and it could actually be pretty good year over year. And that's the optimistic approach, and that's the one that we're kind of focused on, and we'll figure it out soon. But I think, for us, like, volatile and caution are kind of the key words for us, and we'll keep an eye on it.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you both very much for helping out and going through this really interesting discussion on the DC market, and
It's interesting.
it's
Man, would
very
you live
interesting.
here like every day, this stuff? Like that's the national news is our local news, right, John? And
Exactly.
like that's it. And you see it in every day, and it's a roller coaster.
Definitely.
And so many people are being negatively impacted by it, right? And everyone who works for the government is just concerned about their jobs going away and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. So,
Absolutely.
but Brian, great talking to you again. Jonathan, pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, it was great speaking with you. Hopefully we can stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Thank you both very much, and thank all of you
Okay.
for listening.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm CoStar's Jan Freitag. And together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insights into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we also don't mind getting into some good-natured disagreement from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking data together, anything can happen, and it usually does.
Find us on hotelnewsnow.com and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Search for Hotel News Now, and thank you for listening.
This episode was recorded February 27th, 2025, and produced and edited by Brian Roten. Go to hotelnewsnow.com every day for the latest in hotel industry news.